The following program contains graphic descriptions of violence and may include disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to another gripping episode of Evil Exposed Killers. Tonight, we delve into the chilling story of Ivan Milat, a man whose name has become synonymous with terror in Australia. Known as the backpacker murderer, Milat preyed on young travelers exploring the vast landscapes of New South Wales, luring them into a nightmare from which they would never return. Join us as we uncover the dark and twisted life of a man who turned the Australian wilderness into his killing ground. This is the story of Ivan Milat, a predator who left a trail of devastation in his wake. Ivan Robert Marco Milat was born on December 27, 1944, in Guildford, New South Wales, Australia, as one of 14 children in a strict, hard-working immigrant family. His father, a Croatian immigrant, ruled the household with an iron fist, instilling in his children a sense of discipline and toughness that bordered on brutality. Growing up in this environment, Ivan quickly learned to be self-reliant and developed a fascination with weapons, particularly guns and knives. By his teenage years, Milat's early life was marked by a series of run-ins with the law. He and his brothers became involved in petty theft, breaking and entering, and other criminal activities. Milat's growing criminal record showcased a young man who was increasingly comfortable with violence and lawlessness. Despite this, he managed to avoid serious jail time, always seeming to slip through the cracks of the justice system. As Milat entered adulthood, his criminal activities escalated. He worked various laboring jobs, often using his income to fuel his growing obsession with firearms and survivalist tactics. Milat's love of the Australian bush, a vast, often remote wilderness, gave him the perfect backdrop for honing his skills in hunting and tracking, skills that would later serve a much darker purpose. By the late 1980s, Milat had become a deeply disturbed individual, known to his friends and family as someone with a volatile temper and a penchant for violence. He often spoke of his distrust for the authorities and his desire to live off the grid. It was during this time that Milat began to indulge in his darkest fantasies, targeting unsuspecting travelers who ventured into the Australian wilderness. The late 1980s and early 1990s saw a rise in the popularity of backpacking in Australia, with young travelers from around the world eager to explore the country's rugged landscape. The stretch of road between Sydney and Melbourne, known for its scenic beauty, became a popular route for hitchhikers. Unfortunately, it also became the hunting ground for Ivan Milat, who would soon be known as the backpacker murderer. Milat's method was chillingly effective. He would drive along the highways in his truck, spotting lone hitchhikers or small groups of backpackers. Offering them a ride with a friendly smile, he would lure them into his vehicle, often engaging them in polite conversation to put them at ease. But once they were isolated in the remote bushland, Milat's true nature emerged. His victims were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Milat would bind and gag them, using his superior strength and knowledge of the terrain to overpower them. He would then torture and eventually murder them, often in ways that indicated a deep and sadistic pleasure in causing pain. His weapon of choice was typically a knife, but he also used firearms, adding to the terror he inflicted on his victims. The bodies of Milat's victims were buried in shallow graves in the Belanglo State Forest, a remote area of dense woodland that became his killing ground. Between 1989 and 1992, 7 young backpackers, 5 of whom were international travelers, vanished while hitchhiking along the highways of New South Wales. Their disappearances went largely unnoticed at first, attributed to the transient nature of backpackers, who often traveled without a fixed itinerary or regular communication with their families. It wasn't until September 1992, when 2 runners stumbled upon the remains of 2 bodies in the Belanglo State Forest, that the true extent of Milat's crimes began to emerge. The bodies were identified as British backpackers, Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters, who had been missing for several months. The discovery shocked the nation, and the New South Wales police launched a massive investigation. As the investigation intensified, more bodies were discovered in the forest, all showing signs of extreme violence and torture. The victims had been stabbed multiple times, some even shot in the head execution style. The brutality of the murders, combined with the apparent randomness of the victims, led the media to dub the unknown killer the backpacker murderer. Despite the growing body count, Milat continued to evade capture. He was careful and methodical, leaving few clues at the crime scenes and maintaining a facade of normalcy in his everyday life. To those who knew him, Milat was a hard-working man who enjoyed the outdoors, a description that gave little indication of the monster lurking beneath the surface. The investigation dragged on for years, with the police struggling to connect the murders to a single suspect. The fear among the backpacking community was palpable, with travelers warned to avoid hitchhiking and to stay in well-populated areas. Yet, for all the warnings and precautions, the killer remained at large, a shadowy figure stalking the highways of New South Wales. Milat's eventual downfall would come from within his own family, as suspicion grew among those who knew him best. In 1994, Milat's brother, Richard, contacted the police, providing information that would lead to a breakthrough in the case. Richard's tip, combined with a detailed profile compiled by investigators, pointed directly to Ivan Milat as the prime suspect in the backpacker murders. The police moved quickly, launching a raid on Milat's home in May 1994. What they found inside was a treasure trove of evidence linking Milat to the murders. Belongings of the victims, including clothing, camping gear, and even the cameras they had used to document their travels. The raid also uncovered a cache of weapons, including the same type of gun used in the murders. With the evidence mounting, Milat was arrested and charged with the murders of the 7 backpackers whose bodies had been discovered in Belanglo State Forest. The arrest marked the end of his killing spree, but the true extent of his crimes would only be revealed in the harrowing details of the trial that followed. Ivan Milat's arrest in May 1994 was the culmination of years of fear and uncertainty for the families of his victims and the broader Australian public. As details of his crimes came to light, the nation was gripped by the horrific reality of what had transpired in the Belanglo State Forest. The trial that followed was one of the most sensational and closely watched in Australian history. Milat's trial began in March 1996, and it quickly became clear that the prosecution had a strong case. The evidence against Milat was overwhelming. Not only had items belonging to the victims been found in his possession, but forensic analysis also linked the bullets recovered from the crime scenes to a rifle owned by Milat. Additionally, several witnesses came forward, including survivors who had escaped Milat's clutches, providing chilling testimony of his attempts to abduct them. Throughout the trial, Milat maintained his innocence, often appearing calm and unflappable in court. He denied any involvement in the murders, claiming that he had been framed by the police and his own family. But the evidence was damning, and as the trial progressed, it became clear that Milat was a calculating and remorseless killer. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from Paul Onions, a British backpacker who had been picked up by Milat in 1990 while hitchhiking south of Sydney. Onions testified that after a brief drive, Milat had pulled a gun on him, but he had managed to escape by jumping from the moving vehicle and flagging down a passing motorist. Onions' testimony, along with the items found in Milat's possession, played a crucial role in securing the conviction. After a 3-month trial, the jury found Ivan Milat guilty of the murders of the 7 backpackers. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again be able to harm another person. But for many, the question remained: how many more victims might there be buried in unmarked graves in the vast Australian wilderness? In the years following his conviction, Milat became one of Australia's most notorious criminals, his name synonymous with terror and brutality. Despite being imprisoned, he continued to deny his guilt, refusing to cooperate with authorities and never revealing the full extent of his crimes. His refusal to admit to the murders or provide closure for the families of his victims only deepened the sense of horror surrounding his case. Milat's legacy as the backpacker murderer left an indelible mark on Australia. The case led to increased awareness of the dangers of hitchhiking and a greater emphasis on traveler safety, particularly for those exploring remote areas. The Belanglo State Forest, once a popular destination for outdoor enthusiasts, became a place of dark memories, forever associated with the horrors that occurred there. Milat's case also raised important questions about the role of family and community in identifying and stopping dangerous individuals. Despite signs of his violent tendencies, Milat had been able to carry out his crimes for years without detection, in part due to the silence of those around him. His eventual capture only came after his brother chose to break that silence, highlighting the importance of speaking out when something seems wrong. In 2019, after serving more than 20 years in prison, Ivan Milat died of esophageal cancer. His death brought an end to one of Australia's most infamous criminal careers, but it did little to ease the pain of the families who had lost their loved ones to his brutality. Milat took the full truth of his crimes to the grave, leaving behind countless unanswered questions and a legacy of fear. The story of Ivan Milat, the backpacker murderer, serves as a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight. His crimes shocked a nation and left a trail of devastation that will never be forgotten. As we reflect on the lives lost and the terror inflicted, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance, the need for justice, and the enduring impact of one man's horrific actions. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Evil Exposed Killers. The story of Ivan Milat is a harrowing reminder of the darkness that can reside within seemingly ordinary individuals. As we remember the victims of his brutal crimes, let us remain vigilant in our communities and stand united against those who would bring harm to the innocent. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, evil thrives in silence. Please like and subscribe to Evil Exposed for more riveting stories.